All right, and welcome back to another edition of the Five Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers. Episode number 10 already. Hard to believe we've been on the air for 10 weeks, but things continue to roll along here on the Five Star Podcast of Wrestling as we welcome back an old friend, Justin Lowery, kind enough to join us. Sean Saputo, he's apparently turned up missing the last 2 weeks, Justin, but I think you did a good enough job your first time around, despite some technical issues outside of your control, to earn a spot back. So I know you're very excited to be on. And first, we're going to talk about Monday Night Raw. So before we get into specific things, I just want to get your pulse of Monday Night Raw over the last couple weeks since we last talked. Do you like what the Red Brand's been doing recently, or are you a little disappointed with the efforts?
Well, I think we kind of text back and forth in between the shows. I've been doing a whole lot of flipping. The NHL and NBA playoffs have been grabbing my attention. So I haven't caught all of the last couple episodes here and there, but for the most part, no, I don't like what's happening.
Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but the news of SmackDown getting the $1 billion contract over 5 years and how that might change what SmackDown becomes once we get into the later stages of 2019. I don't believe that there's been any official word yet on what's going to happen with Monday Night Raw. How much do you think that the show might change in the short term once something is determined along those lines? Do you think that WWE will change and increase, maybe improve the product to try to increase viewers short term to prove that this was a wise investment, or really, do they not have to worry about changing anything for the next year plus with the way they've been going?
I think in the short term, you're not going to see any effects, not till the end of 18, because I think that starts, October of 19?
I believe you're right.
So, I mean, we still over a year and a half away. We're not going to see anything like that soon. Later down the line, though, clearly SmackDown's going to become a much bigger show. Getting Fox is a pretty big deal. Fox has seen the more homes than USA. Friday night, though, I question that time slot, but I think that basically means the end of the brand split once again, because I doubt Fox is going to want just half the roster. They're going to want people like Brock Lesnar on that show.
That's a good point. So we'll see what happens with Raw. I think probably sooner rather than later we'll find out where Raw will be potentially for the next 5 or so years. But again, no word on that yet, so we can only go by what we've seen unfolding the past few weeks. And really, there's a number of things that stood out to me this week on Raw. The first thing I want to talk about is the rematch between Braun Strowman and Finn Balor. Now, I thought those two had a terrific main event 2 weeks ago. It was something new, something fresh, and it was a face versus face match that really worked because Braun played his role as the dominant big man to perfection, and I think Finn Balor won over a lot of doubters with his performance. Many people, probably some higher-ups within WWE, maybe said this isn't a credible challenger to a Brock Lesnar, for instance, for the Universal title. I thought that he really silenced a lot of doubters with his performance the first time around. I have to question, however, why do you have that same match the very next week? To me, that was a special match, a special main event. By having it once again the next week, it kind of lost its luster and to an extent kind of lost the effect that it had the first time, because if you're doing the suspense of belief with Finn Balor challenging a bigger guy, why do it consistently? I think you kind of have to pick your spot. So just not even taking into consideration how the match turned out, I didn't like the idea of having a second straight week of Braun Strowman and Finn Balor.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It reminds me of WCW a lot in its day. The only thing maybe that they're building towards, which we have not seen Finn put on the paint in a very, very long time. And if you might, if they finally get a match at Money in the Bank or down the line, Finn could put the paint back on and find that demon. The demon is what he needs to beat Braun. I might be giving them too much credit, thinking long term like that. But if they're not thinking like that, I think it's this, week to week booking. They get there and they figure it out, and they don't have any long term plans with either of these men. and that's why they're just throwing these matches together week by week.
So let's talk a little bit about the match. Again, I thought 2 weeks ago was terrific. I thought it was sort of along the same lines. The second time around, just it didn't have that unique, fresh feel to it because we had just seen it the week prior, and you know, I'm not sure that we really needed the rematch because there was a clean winner the first time. However, second time around, there was not a clean winner, and that's not really a surprise. Kevin Owens was on commentary, and I thought he was doing a terrific job with that, as always, because he's an entertaining guy. But you kind of had the feeling that he was going to intervene in some capacity. Ultimately, he did end up interrupting this match after seemingly Finn Balor had the upper hand. And it's simply building towards Money in the Bank, as they're 3 of the 4 competitors representing Raw in the Money in the Bank men's ladder match, also joined by Bobby Roode. So seeing that match, and it was early in the show, I don't know if they were, again, just trying to get the viewers that enjoyed it the week before, but I think it's probably the right decision to have. I'm not a big fan of the disqualification run-in finishes, but in this case, I think it would be better than trying to have another clean finish, because I don't see the benefit of Finn Balor defeating Strowman cleanly, because then you're really hurting Braun, but you don't want to have Finn lose the match cleanly 2 straight weeks either. So I think it was the easy outcome that they went with.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I mean, they're never going to have Finn beat Braun. That's just not going to happen. And I mean, I could have saw Finn losing twice in a row, because I don't think Vince thinks very highly of him. You know, when you said winning over naysayers, I think those naysayers are basically WWE management, because I think the fans are behind him. I think kids are behind him. But, you know, Vince like his bigger guys, and, you know, he won the Universal title. He got hurt right away, and that was the end of his big push. So, you know, they know Vince sells merch. They want to keep him in high-profile situations. Braun's very over, and because they don't want to pull the trigger on him because they want Reigns, it kind of puts those guys in limbo a little bit. And maybe we'll have a better idea after Money in the Bank where everyone's going to go, who's going to win the briefcase. But until then, I think until Money in the Bank, you're going to see a lot of these repetitive plot lines and matches happening on Raw.
Speaking of Finn, speaking of Braun Strowman, do you see either one of those guys winning Money in the Bank briefcase?
I don't see Finn. I could see Braun. You know, that I think that could be an interesting storyline. A guy of that size and, you know, that strength, the way they portray him, and to hold that, you know, briefcase, I think you could actually have some very entertaining segments week to week.
So to me, it would be kind of the reversal, because you normally get the heel that's in a sense sort of going to do the cowardly cash-in. I mean, I think a guy like Miz sort of played it perfectly when he was the Money in the Bank winner. Now, we did see a monster and Kane win it. He cashed it in that night and won the title. So that could happen. Well, I want to say that could happen with Braun, but it can't, because Brock Lesnar's not going to be there. But you get the idea. He's not going to necessarily wait around and wait for the most opportunistic scenario if he wins it. The problem with that is I don't think he's a guy that really needs it, because I think right now he probably should be the next in line to get a Universal title shot anyway.
You would think, but I mean, who is next in line? Do we even know who next in line is?
I would say it's got to either be Braun or Roman gets his third chance at it because of how they finished the last time around.
Right, but you think, I mean, how many more chances is Roman going to get? I mean, just logically, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's like you've had your chances, you haven't beat them, move on. But yeah, who knows? I do think Braun, though, holding it, you know, week to week, you know, calling out Lesnar, trying to find Lesnar. I do think you could do some entertaining skits with him, because he's shown to have a comedic, you know, attitude about himself. And it just would be something different for a change anyway. I mean, Bobby Roode isn't, you know. No,
I don't think there's any chance it's going to be Bobby Roode. I would be surprised if it's Kevin Owens as well. Kevin Owens does a great job, but I don't think that they want him necessarily with that honor at this point.
He just signed that new contract. You know, is that a reward for signing a new contract? But on the other hand, you're seeing reports that Vince McMahon once again is mad at him about his weight. You know, I mean, it's either going to be Braun or Finn, but my guess is going to be Braun.
And by the way, when you were saying Roman, how many chances is he going to get? The first thing that popped to my mind, you might remember, oh God, at this point, probably 7 years ago or so, Christian with Randy Orton. He just wanted one more chance, and it was great because at first he was a face, and it was like, okay, yeah, I mean, he deserves another chance, and then he just kept going with it and he became a heel along the way, and it was great. I would love if they did that with Roman Reigns, but of course we know that's not going to happen.
No, they're going with the underdog gimmick that the management hates him, which, don't get me started on that, because everybody knows management loves him. So that isn't going to work.
I want to talk about something else that happened on Monday Night Raw. Seth Rollins, his IC title open challenges, the matches have been great, no question. The one thing I'll say is in recent weeks, it hasn't been the surprise opponent. And I actually think that's generally what makes it so exciting and makes it so interesting. We've already known he's had before Raw even started, he already had matches set up with Kevin Owens and now Jinder Mahal. I would rather get back to the surprise opponent type thing more times than not. But he defeats Jinder, probably about the best match you could expect Rollins to have with Jinder Mahal. But the big thing occurred afterwards as Seth Rollins got a rude wake-up call with a guitar shot to the back by Elias. And this stemmed from Rollins interrupting Elias' song earlier in the evening. So everyone that watches this, are thousands upon thousands of viewers every week, understand that Elias is certainly one of the favorites of this show. For weeks, we've been talking about how he needs a real feud, a real storyline that doesn't just start and finish on Raw, but culminates at least in one big-time pay-per-view match. It seems like he's now going to have his opportunity sooner rather than later against the IC champion of Seth Rollins. And I have seen a lot of excitement amongst fans in terms of their anticipation of this feud.
Oh, no, I agree. One, when it comes to Rollins, I think Rollins can easily be the face of the company right now if they so choose. He's way over, and, Elias, it's pretty awesome. He comes out, and immediately when he comes out, gets cheered. They go along with what he's saying, and then just like that, he's able to get the crowd to turn on him, which is, that shows what a great heel he is. A lot of times you have that cool heel where people still cheer, but he's able to get everybody to boo him, and he's definitely worked his way up the ranks and has earned a shot here. I'm looking forward to the match. I'm anxious to see what he can do in a ring with somebody like Seth Rollins. I think there's a lot more to see with Elias in the ring. And I'm hoping that we get to, see a 15-minute match with Rollins at Money in the Bank. And I do think there's a chance that you could see a title change. I'm going to bet that Rollins retains, but I think the feud can continue. And I do think there is a shot at him gaining that title.
And regardless of the outcome, it just seems like this is something that's going to elevate Elias being in this spot. Because, yes, he's been in pay-per-view main events before in the Elimination Chamber. But as far as a one-on-one match for the IC title at a pay-per-view against the guy in Rollins that you just said really at this point is probably the hottest guy in the entire company, doesn't get much better than that for Elias. So I think this is a golden opportunity for him to really continue to climb up the ladder. In terms of his reaction, he's already one of the top guys. Now you add a top-notch feud to go with it, and it seems like his rise continues through the ranks here in 2018. Justin, we have a fan that wants to chime in?
Yeah, I got my dog. He's a big Seth Rollins fan.
Oh, nice.
Seth Rollins. He likes to burn it down. Yeah.
Anything that you want to see between Elias and Rollins in the next couple weeks to build this, or really was that guitar shot enough to already make this match in your mind?
I would really like to, just see a little back and forth interaction. Rollins is a pretty good promo. Elias has good promo skills. I would just like to see a little bit more back and forth. I could see Vince doing some type of sing-off, or Vince loves those crazy skits. So I could see Rollins playing, a little music and doing some type of comedy skit, something like that.
Sort of like what Braun Strowman did in his feud with Elias. It ultimately led to the
basically something like that.
Yeah, the what was it? The Symphony of Destruction match, I believe, was the culmination of that short-lived feud. Speaking of feuds that have been percolating recently, the Raw Women's title, it has been a major storyline over the last couple weeks, and I've been very vocal in my belief that this entire storyline just makes no sense. But they're going forward with it. Doesn't matter what I think. It's going to be Ronda Rousey challenging for the Raw Women's Championship against Nia Jax. Ronda's first ever singles match, by the way, for keeping track, just her second match total after her WrestleMania debut. Give her credit. She had a great debut. She's been on Raw most weeks. She's not really a part-timer. She's been there pretty regularly, but I don't like the idea that she's challenging for this title already. And my question was, how do you make it work with these two? Because you've been building Nia Jax for the last 3 or 4 months as this face that people can relate to because she's been bullied because of her size, her weight. Alexa Bliss being the bad guy for bringing that to light. And now all of a sudden, you fast forward a week, and it seems like Nia Jax is back to being an absolute heel. And there was no explanation really, but it seems like all the work that they put in getting the fans to try to sympathize with Nia, it's out the window. Ronda Rousey's going to be clearly the face and the fan favorite in this match, and I don't know what they're going to do with Nia when it all wraps up, but at least for the time being, she's playing a heel, and she's playing one without really an explanation, and that's what drives me crazy about booking today in the WWE, is that they really offered no explanation as to why she's a heel, but they said, hey, as of Monday, play a heel, and that's what we got on Raw and her interaction with Ronda. She was bullying some sort of no-name female talent there on Raw.
Yes. Well, I mean, Jax, I don't like Jax, period. And then I am interested in seeing the match because I think it could be a debacle because Jax isn't the best worker in the world, and you're putting her in there with somebody pretty inexperienced. She had a hell of a showing at WrestleMania, but she's still inexperienced, and you wonder how that's going to go. I did read a report, which I hope they don't do this, is where Ronda is going to win the match, but right after the match, Natalya, who earlier will win Money in the Bank, will cash in, win the title, and start their feud.
And I could see that happening, but here's my issue with that. One, if Natalya wins Money in the Bank early in the night, she should be somewhat spent from that, correct?
Logically speaking, yes.
So why is she going to be able to defeat Ronda Rousey, even if Ronda has to really be tested by Nia Jax? It just makes Ronda, I mean, to have her lose already, I understand the circumstances, but to me, that doesn't really do Ronda Rousey any favors. If that's the case, why do you even give her the title this quickly? Why not hold off?
She could, like you said, go the distance, win the title, and then, Jax could attack her post-match. We've seen that happen before. Didn't CM Punk win his first title, with like Batista laying out Edge, and he just comes down the ring and, gets the pin? You could see something like that. I personally would rather see Natalya cost her the match and not have her win, period, than her win, then get cashed in on. I would rather see that. They put themselves in a corner they've been building, Jax up, and now you're having her face Ronda Rousey out of nowhere with no, feud building up. To me, it's almost like a lose-lose. I have no idea what they're going to do, and I think no matter what they do, there's no win. It's not a winning situation.
I agree, and you've already, again, negated all the work you had putting into making Nia a face. I mean, that's not going to work going forward. The ironic thing, and I know I'm not the only one to say this, is all this stuff about Alexis saying that Nia was a bully, wasn't that sort of proven true by what Nia did? Again, she's beating up on a local jobber. You can see here on the screen her opponent, a no-namer who Nia pretty much embarrassed, made easy work of, and was basically yelling at Ronda the entire time. So this screams of something that they booked without thinking of how it's going to unfold. They just put the match together and said, we'll figure it out. And they don't have a good way to make it work. Even if the match delivers and is great, I still have complaints about how they ultimately got to this point and what it's going to do for both of these women going forward.
And not to mention, with the outcome possibly being another Natalya title reign, who wants to see that? I don't want to see that. I would rather see somebody else, younger, more up and coming, win Money in the Bank, which I always do. I hate seeing established veterans normally win the briefcase, but there's no outcome that's going to be pretty.
Well, you sort of transitioned pretty easily for me here, Justin, because we're going to talk about the women's gauntlet match that main evented Raw, and it was to determine the final representative on the Raw side for the women's Money in the Bank. And ultimately, it was Sasha Banks who prevailed. There were 7 women in the match, and it was a match that just did not feel like a main event from the start. And I know something that you want to chime in on here, Justin, is the fact that the comparison between the men's gauntlet match that happened back in, I think, February, maybe late January, that was terrific, that people will be talking about for months to come. And now the comparison to the women's one, it's really not a comparison. I mean, the women's one was hastily executed. I think the first 2 matches of the gauntlet maybe were a total of 2.5, 3 minutes. When you have that many competitors and only about 20 minutes, you just rush through, and it's not really believable because you're getting decisions in the first 30, 60 seconds. What's the point? I mean, I'd rather this, instead of them throwing all the women in together, just maybe pick 2 or 3 that really deserve it and have them go. But I know they were going with the redemption idea for all the women. I wasn't really entertained until the very end, and we'll get to that. But I thought the majority of this match fell flat for me.
I agree. When we talked earlier, I was disappointed in the time they had, like 20 minutes. I did not expect them to get close to 2 hours like the men did. But, they like to hype up the Divas Revolution and everything they're doing. We all know Stephanie likes to put her face out there like she, started the whole thing. I don't see any reason why they couldn't have a whole hour. I mean, there's not a lot going on right now in the post-WrestleMania season. You easily could have had it in an hour and gave each, woman at least 10 minutes or so in the ring to showcase themselves. That's what I would like to see. I like women's wrestling. A given time, they can put on a hell of a show, and I think they dropped the ball there. When it was first announced, I was thinking like an hour. I kept going back and forth because I didn't want to miss that, thinking, okay, it's probably going to be the 10 o'clock hour then. And, when it was 10:15 and they weren't on yet, I got suspicious. I'm like, well, this isn't going to get the time that it's needed or due. And it kind of sucks for those girls. I mean, they know the men got close to 2 hours, and that made Rollins what he is now. That match itself springboarded him back to superstar status because he had the hour and 5 minute performance in that. And I believe the first 2 matches alone, I can't remember exactly who Rollins beat. I know one of them was Roman Reigns from the get-go, but the first 2 matches were both 20-plus minute matches. So you were having legitimate main event time matches just to start the gauntlet. Let's go back to how this women one unfolded, and I had the graphic up there momentarily. Bayley's the first one out. She pins Liv Morgan, the blue tongue, in, I think, 3 seconds. I mean, she literally gave her the Bayley to belly, pinned her, then she beats Sarah Logan in a couple seconds, and then somehow we're supposed to believe that all 3 members of the Riot Squad came out back to back to back. Very low odds that would happen, but that's how it unfolded, with Ruby Riott ultimately defeating Bayley after the other 2 attacked her. And then we get Dana Brooke. So, we're 5 in, and really nothing of note has happened to this point because Bayley and Ruby didn't really get much of an opportunity to show their skills, and then the other 3 just at this point are sort of, they're basically helpers. They're not singles competitors that really stand out. I mean, Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan are basically just there as backup for Ruby Riott at this point. Dana Brooke's a statistician for Titus O'Neil, so you weren't expecting that any of those 3 were going to do that much. And then you get to Mickie James and then later Sasha Banks, where it started to pick up a little bit.
But the beginning, I mean, you go through 4 women in a span of 5 minutes or so. It just didn't set the right tone, I don't think, for the match.
It almost seemed rushed. It's almost like they realized all of a sudden they had 20 minutes and they had to, hurry up and go through some things. Like you talk about how it put Rollins back on the map. Someone like Bayley, who kind of lost, in the last year and a half, a little luster off of her call up. She could have been showcased. Even Sasha Banks has lost a little something, I think, recently. Either one of them could have got a major rub. And talk about Ruby Riott. She's a pretty good in-ring performer, and she hasn't really been able to show that. How about giving her, Bayley, or Sasha their own 20-minute match in between the gauntlet, or even with Mickie James. I mean, she's a veteran who, still very good in the ring. It was more, old diva stuff where they run around, someone loses 3 minutes, and you forget about it the next day.
And the ending I thought was good. Mickie James was the sixth woman out, and she was the hometown favorite, so she got a good reaction. Her and Ruby had a nice little exchange. But then it got really good when Sasha and Ruby were going at it later, and I thought that was a pretty darn good finish. That being said, I think a lot of people watching, myself included, said, well, yeah, those two are doing their best, but the match already was sort of disappointing. But I thought that it was big for Sasha to get the win and to get into a match like this. That being said, I think it goes back to what you said on the men's side, Justin. When you have the competitors that they have, Alexa Bliss, Sasha Banks, Charlotte on the SmackDown side, you have 3 women at least, and you might be able to throw Natalya into that conversation as well, that really, I don't think need to win a match like this. It's not going to be a career-defining thing because they've already had a tremendous career and been multi-time champions. So while I think Sasha being in the match is good for the overall quality of what the ladder match will be, I think someone like Ruby Riott would have benefited much more from getting into a match like this, and then you get those fresh faces in there and it elevates them. I don't really see a lot of that in this women's match. Again, you go with Ember Moon on Raw, big opportunity for her. She certainly fits the bill of an up-and-comer. You look over on SmackDown, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now you got your established veterans. You got Charlotte, who of everyone in the women's division, she's the last person that needs to win Money in the Bank. And then you have Becky Lynch, probably good for her because she wasn't doing too much. Naomi, she's been a multi-time champion, and then Lana, who really doesn't deserve to be in the match. So I just think the younger talent that was left out, people like Sonya Deville, Mandy Rose, the Iconics, and then maybe a Ruby Riott on Raw, they sort of they didn't get the right women in this match ultimately, and I think that was further solidified with this gauntlet outcome.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I do give Lana a shot at winning this. I mean, it's a perfect match to hide her flaws, and I could see her winning that. And Carmella, it really helped Carmella out. Not that Carmella's she's not a good in-ring performer. She has improved though. But her character has I do like Carmella's character, and I could see Lana also being that slimy heel with the briefcase. I can see Lana winning that. Actually, that's probably gonna be my pick. It might be the stupidest pick ever.
That would be bad, right? I mean, there's no way that's gonna be.
I don't expect good booking from WWE anymore. I usually expect the worst because they give us the worst.
I would say that's probably pretty true. Before we wrap up this Raw review, Justin, any thoughts on anything else that stood out? Again, we touched on Finn and Braun. We touched on Elias starting his feud seemingly with Seth Rollins, and then the women's Raw title match between Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax, as well as the gauntlet match that main evented Sasha Banks ultimately winning that. Anything else, either good or bad, that comes to mind for you when you think of Monday Night Raw this past week?
Good or bad? Not really. I mean, status quo. I feel like the last.
Did you enjoy the cookout?
You know what? I wanted to block that. As soon as that happened, and so they showed the baked beans, I said to myself, who's going to get the baked beans dumped on them? Because every holiday, 4th of July, there'll be another food fight.
Every year on SmackDown for Thanksgiving, they did the exact. And Cole referenced that. Cole made light of that.
picture Vince McMahon sitting back there laughing and, hysterically, like thinking this is the funniest thing in the world. And maybe to like a 10-year-old kid it is. For me, instead of having that, add more to the women's match. Though I do find Bo Dallas hilarious. I will say that.
Well, that was maybe the low light of Monday Night Raw. Was no Bobby Lashley sister segment with Sami Zayn,
that could be the worst segment of the year. Right there.
Nonetheless, Raw, some highlights and certainly some things that fell short as well. But all told, they are building towards Money in the Bank, so we'll ultimately have to judge depending on how that turns out. That's going to do it for the Raw review. We are going to step aside. We'll be back to talk SmackDown with the SmackDown summary just a matter of moments. I'm Sean Meyers signing off once again. Stick around for another episode of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, Talking SmackDown up next.